In the Arkansas State Archives, there is a photograph. Its edges curled, its surface cracked like dried riverbed clay. It shows 43 townspeople gathered on a splintered station platform in the summer heat of 1865. The long exposure of the camera blurs their faces, but you can see the way they stand, as if waiting for something important. A mother clutches a child to her hip. A farmer holds his hat in both hands. On the back of the photo, written in a faded hand, August 3rd, 1865, Briars Bend. That day they boarded a train, and neither the train nor the people were ever seen again. By the turn of the century, Briars Bend had been erased from maps, its name struck from county ledgers, but not everything disappeared. A sheriff's ledger stops mid-sentence. A pocket watch was found buried in the dirt, its hands frozen at 3:17 p.m., and in whispers passed from generation to generation. There are still those who say that, on certain nights, you can hear a train whistle where no tracks remain. Briars Bend was born of the railroad. In 1852, a surveyor's map marked a bend in the Little Cypress River, a place where the ground was high enough to build a spur line that could connect the cotton fields of southern Arkansas to distant markets. A handful of families settled there, drawn by promise. They cut timber, laid tracks, and hammered together a few rough-hewn homes. By 1865, Briars Bend had only 87 residents. They lived in weathered clapboard houses, their roofs patched with tin, their windows covered in flour sack curtains. A one-room schoolhouse leaned against the edge of the pines. A narrow church, never quite finished, stood beside the station, its bell tower just a wooden frame against the sky. The air carried the scent of creosote from the rails and the heavy sweetness of honeysuckle that tangled along the fence posts. On foggy mornings, the mist would roll in low from the bayou, covering the tracks until it looked like the trains simply floated into town. For all its roughness, Briars Bend was a place of routine and hope. The station clock, a brass-faced timepiece brought from St. Louis, was its heartbeat, ticking steadily above the platform. At noon, it chimed a thin, uneven note, and farmers would pause their work to listen. The railroad was everything here. It brought flour and sugar. It took out cotton and timber. It carried letters, wedding dresses, and rumors from the outside world. But some believed the ground was wrong. Old hunters muttered about the unsettled soil, saying the earth had been carved by older hands long before the tracks came. There were stories of strange lights in the lowlands, of voices heard when the fog came thick, of animals that refused to cross certain patches of earth. The townspeople laughed at these things, but uneasily. They kept building. They kept waiting for the trains. In the evenings, smoke from kitchen stoves curled up into the pine-dark sky, and lanterns glowed in windows like stars. Briars Bend looked like any other railroad town. But history doesn't remember its streets or its people. It remembers only that photograph, the clock over the platform, and the way the hands of that clock would one day stop forever. Briars Bend was more than its tracks. It was the people who lived along them. 87 names written into a single ledger, most now smudged and unreadable. At the center was Silas Granger, the station master and founder of the town. Silas was the sort of man who lived by timetables. He kept his pocket watch polished bright, checked the station clock every morning, and corrected anyone who was even a minute off. Locals said he had the look of a man waiting for something, though no one could say what. Then there was Reverend Elijah Cole, a tall, gaunt preacher whose sermons carried warnings that unsettled even the faithful. In the unfinished church beside the station, he would stand behind the raw wood pulpit and murmur, "Not every journey has a return." Few forgot those words, though most chose not to speak of them. Clara Monroe taught the town's few children in the leaning schoolhouse. Her handwriting filled the margins of hymnals and old books, but her diary, found decades later, would hold the lines that haunted historians. "The children are restless. The fog feels heavy this week." Sheriff Amos Lyle was Briar's quiet law. His office was a single room with a crooked desk, a ledger, and a single iron cell that had rarely been used. He kept records meticulously, logging disputes over fences, lost cattle, even sightings of lights near the spur. His entries always ended with a period, all except the last one. There were the Monroe sisters, who were embroidered in the shade by the church steps. The Jeffers family, who sold eggs and cornbread from their kitchen window. Isaac Holloway, a Civil War veteran, who sat on the same bench outside the station each day, staring at the tracks like they might bring something he'd lost. These weren't people who thought they were writing history. They were farmers, mothers, children who played by the well and learned their letters by lamplight. Yet their routines carried a strange undercurrent, even then. Neighbors whispered that Silas kept extra lamps burning at the station long after the last train had passed. That Reverend Cole often walked the tracks at night, his Bible open, as if he were reading the darkness itself. In his ledger, Sheriff Lyle wrote it down plainly. "The town feels uneasy this summer, as though something is coming, and we don't know from where." That line was dated July 11th, 1865. By August, the pages would fall silent. The summer of 1865 came hot and heavy to Briar's Bend, the kind of heat that slowed the town clock, made dogs lie in the dirt without moving, and turned the air thick enough to drink. And with it, the first signs of something wrong. It began with the animals. Cows were found still as stone, their eyes cloudy, their bodies untouched, but lifeless. Chickens stopped laying, horses shied from the tracks, as if something unseen waited there. Sheriff Amos Lyle wrote it down, as he always did. 3 head dead in the night. No wound, no reason. Holloway swears he saw lights down by the spur, but I found only fog. Then came the warped rails. Silas Granger noticed first. A stretch of track just beyond the bend had twisted overnight, bent in a curve like soft metal, though there'd been no storm, no heat strong enough to do it. He had the section replaced. 2 mornings later, the new rails bent again. Clara Monroe's diary from July 23rd carries a line that chills more than any sheriff's note. "The children have begun to sleepwalk. Always toward the station. I bolt my door now." And then the timetable arrived. A single sheet of paper folded into the ledger at the depot. It listed an unfamiliar train. No name, no number, no origin, no destination. Just one line. Arrival, August 3rd, 3 p.m. Silas brought it to Sheriff Lyle, confusion knotting his brow. The sheriff wrote in his ledger, "New schedule." "I've never seen these markings. Silas says it's official, no name for the line." The paper bore a railroad seal, but neither man recognized it. Whispers began. Some thought it meant new trade, new supplies. Others muttered about ghost lines. Old folk talk about trains that ran where no maps showed, trains that never came back. In the pulpit of the unfinished church, Reverend Cole's voice dropped low, almost a whisper. Not every journey has a return. What boards may not come home? Some laughed, most didn't. Still, they prepared. Silas oiled the hinges on the station doors. Clara taught her children to wave politely to new arrivals, and in his office, Sheriff Lyle sharpened the nib of his pen. His final ledger entry before the day itself reads only, "The fog came earlier today, thick enough to hide the tracks. Something's coming. I think we all feel it." That was July 31st, 1865. By August 3rd, there would be no more entries. August 3rd, 1865. The fog rolled in before dawn, thicker than anyone remembered. It clung to the trees, to the houses, to the warped track that curved away from town. By noon, Briar's Bend looked like it had been cut off from the world, the edges of the town swallowed in gray. Still, they gathered. 43 people, families, children clutching rag dolls, old men in their Sunday coats. Even Sheriff Amos Lyle closed his office and came to the platform. They said the air was still that day. Too still, not a bird, not a single cicada. At 2:47 p.m., a whistle sounded from somewhere inside the fog. Not the sharp, shrill note of the freight trains they knew. Something lower, stretched, and strange. The train emerged minutes later, black, unmarked, no emblem on its side, no name on its engine. Its windows were dark. The smoke from its stack poured into the fog and seemed to vanish there. Silas Granger stood on the platform, timetable in hand. He checked his pocket watch. He nodded once. The people boarded, the mother with the child, the Monroe sisters, Clara Monroe herself, the Jeffers family, Sheriff Lyle, ledger left open on his desk. Witnesses from a nearby town later said they saw the train pull away, sliding into the fog like it was being swallowed whole. By evening, the platform was empty. By the next day, the town was too. Those who came later, from neighboring hamlets, from distant farms, found houses with meals still on tables, loaves of bread cut but not eaten, tea cooling in cups, boots in the mud by back doors, a quilt half finished, its needle still threaded, the church bell frame empty, a single rope swaying in the stillness. Only one man was left behind, Isaac Holloway, the war veteran, too ill to walk. They found him in his bed, whispering to the ceiling. He lived another 3 days. When asked what he saw, what he heard, he would only shake his head, his breath thin and sharp. On his last night, he muttered one thing, over and over. Not the whistle. Not the whistle. Not the whistle. And then there was silence. For decades after that August day, Briar's Bend was spoken of in murmurs, a ghost story told in smoke-filled kitchens and along dimly lit rail lines. The official search ended quickly. The tracks beyond the bend were deemed unstable, the spur marked closed, the land left to the creeping pines. But the earth has a way of giving back what's buried. 30 years later, in 1896, a boy hunting for scrap iron found something jutting out of the dirt near the old platform. A pocket watch. Its case was cracked, its glass clouded, its hands frozen at 3:17 p.m., the time the black train was said to have arrived. In 1902, loggers clearing part of the bayou unearthed a ledger, the leather eaten soft, pages swollen with damp. It was Sheriff Amos Lyle's book. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. The whistle is not like any I've heard, Beth. Nothing more. No period. No final word. Clara Monroe's diary surfaced next, pulled from a creek bed after a flood. Her handwriting trailed off on the last page. They waved, but no one waved back. Some pages were smeared, words blurred into unreadable ink, but the fragments that remained felt like someone whispering through time, a woman writing ordinary thoughts in an extraordinary moment, unaware her words would outlive her by centuries. Railroad crews claimed they found a sunken spur while surveying the area in 1911. A rusted rail, buried deep, pointing into the trees, then swallowed by roots. They didn't dig. The old-timers in nearby towns said the ground there didn't like to be disturbed. By then, the story of Briars Bend had shifted from tragedy to caution. Children were warned not to walk the dead rails. Men who hunted the lowlands swore they sometimes heard a faint whistle in the fog, even when no trains had run there for decades. The fragments, the watch, the ledger, the diary were boxed, cataloged, and stored in county archives. But together, they tell a story no official record has ever been able to explain. Time stopped. A sentence left unfinished. A wave that was never returned. By 1900, Briars Bend was no longer a town. The railroad spur was abandoned, marked unsuitable on company ledgers. County clerks crossed its name from tax rolls. State maps were redrawn. The bend, the church, the little station, all erased with a single stroke of ink. It wasn't destroyed. It was forgotten. The land was sold, piece by piece, to logging companies and cattle ranchers. But few stayed long. Houses rotted back into the soil. The church frame collapsed. Its bell never cast. Those who lived in nearby towns began to tell stories in low voices. Don't walk the old rails after dark. Hunters spoke of a distant whistle, faint as a dream floating through the fog. Travelers said they saw lamplight out in the trees where no houses stood. The government treated the matter like an anomaly, an entry in an archive, a curiosity for clerks. But the locals treated it like a wound. In 1921, a surveyor in Little Rock cataloging old rail lines found a telegram buried in a folder marked Miscellaneous. It was dated August 3rd, 1865. It read simply, "Train arrived. Passengers boarding. Do not send another." There was no signature, no explanation. The telegram was filed away, forgotten, like the town itself. Today, if you look at the official records, Briars Bend is a blank space. But ask the old families in southern Arkansas, and they'll tell you some places don't just disappear. They're quiet. The story of Briars Bend doesn't end in an archive. The town is gone, its station rotted, its houses swallowed by vines. But something remains. Ask anyone who's walked the lowlands on a foggy night. They'll tell you they heard it. A whistle, faint and distant, cutting through the stillness. Some say it's the wind. Others say it's the rails, rusting and shifting in the soil. But some, the ones who know the old stories, will lower their voices and say, it's the train. The same black engine that came on August 3rd, 1865. The same that took 43 souls and vanished into the mist. No one knows where it went. No one knows why it came. The ledgers stop mid-sentence. The clocks are frozen. The rails sink deeper each year. But the whistle remains. And when you hear it, ask yourself one thing. If the rails took them, where did they go?